Shall we talk about carnation buttonholes? I'm just checking I've got my microphone plugged in. I have. Oops, I've just knocked the camera in doing that. So let's get started. So, carnation buttonholes. I'm not going to talk about the flowers just yet. The most important thing when you start making your buttonholes is making sure that you've got the right mechanics. So what do I mean by mechanics? That is the hardware that you need when you do your flowers. So we have flowers, we have greenery, and we have the mechanics. So I'm going to get rid of these and my little sign. And start with floristry tape. Out of the way, distracting me up there. So you need to make sure that you are buying some floristry tape. It might be called corsage tape or gutta percha tape, and it's the tape that has a bit of stretch and give in it. This is a plasticky one, and I can stretch it and stretch it until it breaks. So I'm right-handed. If I hold it firmly in my left and just pull, you can see it's getting more and more translucent until it snaps. So that's one kind of tape. It's quite a plasticky and green. Another kind of tape here, this one's brown, but it also does come in green. This one here is more like crepe paper, so it will not so much stretch as ease. So again, watch this gap here as it just marginally gets slightly longer. So it doesn't have that sort of elasticated snap and control as the first one. And you can also get those tapes in different colours. I guess these have been designed for perhaps the cake making industry. So that's the silvery one. I've got a gold and then a white plasticky one as well. So that does exactly the same as the green. So it depends on the look you want to go for. Out of preference, I use this one because I think it's really easy to work with, but I actually prefer the texture of the brown crepey one. And as long as you understand that with the brown crepey tape, you don't get as much pull and stretch, you'll be just fine. Now, what you need to remember is that this tape and this tape aren't the same thing. So when you're shopping or online or going to your garden centre or your local hobby store, wherever you normally buy your floristry supplies, don't buy this tape. This is pot tape or anchor tape, which is the sticky waterproof tape that you use on flower arrangements when you're using flower foam to tie your flower foam in place. So that, as you can see, it's sticking to my fingers. That is totally different to the corsage tape. So they're both green tape, but they do different jobs. So just to make sure, if you're making buttonholes, it's buttonhole tape or corsage tape or gutta percha that you're looking for, and it's the tape that's got a bit of stretch to it. So that's the tapes. The next thing to think about are your floristry wires. I keep my little wires in a box there, and I've got a really heavy bag of wires here. So these wires are 0.71 millimetres and they're 250 millimetres or 25 centimetres in length. And just look at the weight of those, that's 2.5 kilograms of wire. And when you go and buy your wires, whether you're going for the garden centre or you're buying online, you will probably be able to buy not many wires at a time, so you'll be able to get a handful of wires, so you don't need to pay for the packaging of the full 250 kilogram weight. So, and when you do go online, just make sure to confirm what it is you're actually buying. So I would confirm the weight of the wire and the length of the wire. I like using this 25 centimetre length. It's quite long. They do come in shorter lengths as well. So again, it's like everything you buy online. Just be really careful about what you're actually buying. And wires come in different gauges or sizes. I'm just trying to retrieve some of these wires. So for a carnation buttonhole, I would use these 71s or a 0.56 wire, which is slightly finer. And I didn't use a 0.56 today because when I came to look in my workshop, I didn't have a 0.56 around. But you want to be able to wire up your buttonhole so it's nice and secure, but still looks like a natural flower. You don't want it looking really, really stiff. And if you use a wire that is too stiff and straight and thick, you will end up damaging your flower. So it's the balance of choosing the right gauge wire for the flower and the purpose that you're going to be using it for. So I'm going to use those for wiring up the actual carnation. And then in this box here, I've got my rose wires, which are really fine and delicate. And these are, I know these as rose wires, they're silver wires, and they're much, much finer. And I'm going to be using those for wiring up, can you barely see it across the palm of my hand there, for wiring up my ivy leaves. So a very, very simple carnation buttonhole, and you can use the technique to adapt to other buttonholes you want to use. I will show you how to make rose buttonholes in due course, and the wiring technique for that is slightly different. So I'm going to put these wires to one side, put these to one side, put my box away so I don't mislay them or drop them, and then we can talk about the carnations. So, carnations, lean across. You always buy a flower and pinged off at the bottom. So actually I'm going to show you the actual carnation, but I might use this as well. It's pinged off, so I might as well make use of it as it's for practice purposes. When you're buying your flowers for your actual wedding, you need to make sure everything is tip-top condition. But for practice, you can use the odds and ends, like this one here. So I am making carnation buttonholes, and I have been to the supermarket this morning and I've bought a bunch of carnations, and I think they cost me £3. I chose the red ones because they were the only ones available. So your carnations will come in all sorts of different colours. So there is the carnation, lovely frilly head, and this is the calyx here. And you'll quite often see people opening out their carnations by gently encouraging the flower to open. So you can do that if you want, but actually if you buy your flowers ahead of time and let them drink plenty of water, they will open out naturally. But you can, any stubborn flowers, just gently, gently smooth their heads open. And then I have got some ivy as well. I'm choosing ivy to go with my carnations, number one, because right outside my kitchen door, we've got ivy growing over our hedge, so I've picked a length of ivy. Now, you can see here that some of the leaves are damaged with a hole in it, so I'm not going to use those, and I'm going to get rid of those. And so I don't choose them. There's another one here that's got some damage on. So if you are picking things from your garden, they need to be in tip-top condition. I'm going to get rid of those so I don't accidentally use them. And your flowers will need to have had a good drink, and your greenery will have had a good drink as well, so it holds up throughout the wedding. And I will show you in another video how I condition my flowers and greenery. But I thought we'd get on with a really practical exercise first of all. So what I would do here is pull off my ivy leaves from the main stem. You might want to get a selection of sizes. I can see there that one's damaged as well. Oh, look, can you see the little holes in that? It's damaged as well. This one looks all right. And it's up to you how many leaves you put in and what the size are. So you may decide that you just want one bit of greenery with your carnation, or you want to add more to it. So that is the look that we're going for. It is a really, really simple buttonhole. So I'm going to show you first of all how to wire up the leaves. So I use my rose wires. Bring them closer here. They're quite fine, so I'm sliding them off at the end of the table and picking them up. That one landed on the floor. I need to pick that up later. And I hold my wires like a pen. And you just see that tiny bit there. If you hold them too far down, this bit will buckle when you put it into your leaf or your flower. You can straighten it out if that happens, or go to the other end. So I'm hoping you can see that. About a centimetre length of wire there. I turn my leaf over, so that's the front side. I turn my leaf over to the back, and I'm going to stitch into my leaf, and I'm going to stitch a good 3/4 of the way down that leaf to here. So a tiny in and an out. If I turn that over, you'll just see the tiniest of stitches here. So making buttonholes and wire work is all about the workmanship. So I get to about halfway long, and then I'm going to bend these wires back, pinch them here so they don't move too much, so they lie with the natural stem of the ivy leaf. So I've got one stem and 2 pieces of wire. So Joan, you're asking if our list of suitable flowers for buttonholes, who normally wears them, and different ways that you can make them, and how to add in accessories. I can't see the rest of your question, but yes, I will do. So I would say we'll have a chat more generally about flowers another time, but you will need to be guided by what your bride wants to do. I'm getting in a pickle here. So I'll hold that for the moment and then answer your question. You need to be guided by what your bride wants. So it may be that she absolutely detests carnations, and she won't want to have carnation buttonholes. She might want to have roses. So I would say roses and carnations are the sort of stock in trade, the standard choices for buttonholes. If you can put a wire in it, you can make it into a buttonhole. But you also need to remember that your flowers need to be quite robust, because there'll be lots of kissing and hugging going on, and you don't want the flowers to be damaged. And it will depend as well across the seasons of the year. So roses and carnations are all year round flowers, so they are readily available. So I think perhaps I'll back the question back to you, Joan, and you could have a think about what you think might be suitable flowers to use as buttonholes, and then we can talk about that more another time. I'm showing you here a really traditional wired way of making the buttonholes. There is a fashion at the moment not to use wires and to have very natural, almost like mini posies attached to your lapel. And also you could use glue as well and do really modern buttonholes, which have more of a designer element to them and more freedom, because you're not having to wire everything in. But I think those would be topics for another time. So let's go back to our buttonhole here. So we've got the central stem, we've got the 2 wires, so we've got three stems coming down. I'm joining them all together in my hand, and I'm taking one of the wires, it doesn't matter which one, and I'm wrapping that around everything, and I'm only going to go around 3 times. Can you see that? Just make sure that gets into focus. I'll sit there for a while that focuses. Oops, can't quite get the focus right. What I'll do afterwards is I will put a photograph in so you can see. It doesn't want to focus. But what I'm showing you here is when I rub my fingers down here, I can just feel that little ridge where the wires have been wrapped around. I haven't wrapped all the way to the end of the stem. When you're wiring, you want the wire to support your flowers. They replace the natural stem, and they give you the design possibility of being able to bend your leaves to whatever angle you want without snapping the natural stem. But once you've got the wire on, you don't need the natural stem anymore. And I'm going to cut this bit off. You could do it with your fingernail or with your scissors. Like that. So I've cut off the natural stem. I'm left with my... that's bothering me, that bit's stalk. I'm just going to chuck that on the floor. So that would be the first stage in wiring. So you can see my tiny little stitch. I've got 2 bits of wire, I've got a short stem and just the wrapping round here. So that is all I need to do for that for now. I then take my corsage tape, my buttonhole tape, whatever you like to call it, and I'm holding my leaf in my left hand, my tape in my right hand, and I'm going to start by bending the tape over onto the buttonhole. Just to get going, and sometimes it can be really tricky getting going. And then this is the stretchy tape. I'm going to stretch out the tape. You can see it's getting a little bit more translucent. You can see my finger through the tape. And then with my left hand, I'm spinning the leaf into the tape. And when I've got through to the I've sort of eaten up the tape, I pull again. And you can see how fine that's getting there. And I'm holding the tape at an angle. You see it's sort of down here at an angle, so I'm getting more travel down the length of my wired stem. I can just pull that off at the end. So you can see here it looks chunky to there, which is where the natural stem is, and then narrows out. And then you decide how many of these you want to do. So I might make a point of doing a small, medium and large. So we'll go through again, holding wire like a pen, stitching in quite high up, pulling them down into the middle, down to the natural stem, wrapping one wire around everything else, pinching out the green, bring everything together, taking your tape, pinching it on to start, and then easing out the tape. So I'm twisting the leaf into the tape. I pulled too much there. My tape is broken, but not to worry. I'm not wrapping the tape around the stem. I am rotating the stem into the tape. And then my biggest leaf. Bring that through. Wrapping it round. Here, if I've got the long fingernail, you can pinch it off with your fingernail. And then taping it up. And once you get your technique in there, you can be spinning and wrapping quite quickly. So there I have got 3 leaves. Small, medium and large. You could go for loads, and of course you could use any greenery. You know, if you're building this up a bit more, you could have a sprig of hebe in there, whatever you've got to hand really that your bride likes. And then with the carnation, I've cut off a stem. I'm just going to retrim that. Holding that in your hand, taking the bigger wire. So this is a 0.71. Out of preference, I would have used a 0.56, a slightly finer wire. And what I'm going to do here is holding again my wire like a pen. I'm pushing the wire right through the stem. I'm pushing it right the way through, and it will come out. I'm going to move those so you can see against the playing table. Pushing them right the way through. Hopefully it comes there, look. There it is, coming out the other side. And just push it out far enough to then create a little hook on the end. Bend that round. Like that. Little shepherd's crook. And then pulling the wire back out. So that little hook, you see as I go down, can you notice that some of the petals start to just sort of get swallowed down the neck of the flower? And pull it down. So that feels quite secure, but you can't see the wire in the head of the carnation. Do not use this method for your roses because you'll ruin your roses. It's because the head is quite robust and it's frilly that you can't tell where the wire is. So that is wired up. We then have to put the coating on, the green tape, to cover up the stem. So the reason why I am covering up with tape is because, number one, I'm making it look like a natural flower, but I'm actually sealing in the moisture. So I've given the flowers a really good drink of water, and they are, you want them to last as long as possible, but they're not in water during the day. Let me show you again. I'll get one of my fresh carnations here. So trimming it quite close to the top. I tend to trim it at an angle. But the point of wiring is it gives you more flexibility, so you can manipulate the flower to sit where you want it to sit. Going through with 2 wires there. And also, I'm reading your question, Joan, and thinking at the same time. anything that's robust. So you can use the hook method on anything that's really, really robust. I would say probably carnation's the only flower I would do this to. I think everything else I would wire up through the stem end of the flower, but we'll talk about that another time. So I would do it, I will show you in due course with a rose, perhaps with a gerbera, but I would probably only use this method with the carnation because it's frilly and robust and I'm not going to damage the flower. So there we are again. Take a bit of tape. So the reason I am taping is to make, having taken off the natural stem and then making a fake stem, but making it look as natural as possible. But also I am sealing in that cut end. So normally when you have your flowers, you'd have them into flower foam or into plain water, and then we'd carry on drinking and being really, really super fresh. But if I just left that out in the air, it's going to dry out. So to keep my flower in tip-top condition, and this is what enables you to make your buttonholes in advance. Oops. I am going to ignore the doorbell. The dog is barking at the doorbell, but I will carry on. Apologies. So you're sealing in the moisture. So it just makes sure your flowers last longer. So the more fashionable trend at the moment is to have these little posies of flowers. And of course they're out of water all day, so it's possible they're not going to last for so long. So you can see there that the tape is over the cut end of the flower, and then it shrinks then back to the little skinny tape. So if you want a reminder, or you want to practice taping without doing it with the flowers, I bend the tape over. You can see just see the line of the tape in between. Pinch it closed, and then I'm stretching out the tape. You can see it's going a little bit translucent, and then rolling with this hand the wire into the tape. And that might be a really good way of getting you started. Get your confidence going. Don't feel you've got to go out and buy loads of practice flowers. If you're a bit worried about the taping, you could sit and do a bit of taping just to practice. And having done it once, don't waste the wire. You could start again on the other side. Just until you get the practice. And when you feel confident, then you can go out and buy yourself some flowers to practice. If the tape snaps, it doesn't matter. Just, oops, it's probably snapping because I've got these twiddly little bits at the end, but just keep going because it will be seamless, nobody will notice. So my wire's getting a bit lumpy now. I'm just showing you for reminding purposes what the technique is, slightly faster. Okay, so let's start putting things together. So I'm going to, two options here. You can keep ripping your tape off the reel or keep it on the reel, whatever you prefer. If I tend to keep it on the reel because then I don't end up with loads of little tiny bits and it's not quite so wasteful, but it's entirely up to you. And then I would take my flower and my wired pieces and then start to make a little bouquet in your hand. So you want a little bit of the leaf showing. So I would work with what the flower looks like rather than looking at where the wiring starts, because you don't want to be wiring down here. I would say, well, I want my carnation to have this sort of backdrop of leaf. But it's entirely up to you. You are the designer, so you decide what you want the flower to look like. With the warmth of my hand, I can take my hand away and my leaf will stay there. And that's another advantage of taping when you've done your wiring, because the slight tackiness, it's not sticky tape, but the sort of tackiness and the warmth of your hand will keep things in place. I'm sure there's lots of cheats. You could decide that you didn't want to tape everything, but then you've got plain wires slipping around each other. So you just need to have a think about that. So I'll put my biggest flower at the back, and then I'm going to come in at the side with a smaller one. And then this one at the front. And I tend to leave this gap here. Again, it's personal preference I sort of go 3/4 of the way around. Can you see what I did with that leaf there? Because I didn't want to cover up the flower. I've bent it, and that is the beauty of the fact that my leaf is wired. Can you see that the wire is supporting the bend? So I could have the leaf straight or wire it and bend it right the way down. And that's why I wired it so far up the leaf, because the wire is giving this support, and you can bend it to whatever angle you want. So hold that in my hand. A little bit of leaf there. And then start wiring, start taping, sorry. So it's exactly the same thing. Hold the tape with your fingers, and then I'm making sure that these wires all run parallel with my stem. I haven't wrapped them round because that would be too bulky. I just want everything now to be ultra neat and slimline. So again, exactly the same technique. Stretch your tape out. I'm going to just cut this wire down a bit. It's getting in my way. So stretch the tape and twist it round. Stretch and twist. And keep twisting it round. And really, I don't need to go all the way to the end of the tape. I'm just showing off. And then this is what the back looks like. So the front looks like a lovely buttonhole, as you would expect to see on someone's lapel. Just hoping the focus is all right with that when you're watching it. But when you look at the back, you can see the workmanship and the fact that the stem, you've got this exposed bit of wire, but it's neat because you've covered it in tape. You've been really careful with the tiny stitch. So your workmanship is really good. I always say as well, you need to shake everything, make sure it's not going to fall apart. And if you decide that you don't like these sort of wires being quite so exposed, you could take your taping up, and perhaps sometimes I turn the buttonhole the other way around, and you might want to take your taping up onto the calyx, the throat of the flower, if you feel that those little bits of wire look a bit too exposed, and just really finish it off like that. So you might want to go all the way around with your greenery. You might want to have other sprigs of greenery in as well. It's entirely up to you. The next job is to decide how long you want your buttonhole to be, how long you want the stem to be. And again, you'll be guided by your bride. I tend to cut mine about there. Some people leave them much longer. And this is when you have to start looking at all your wedding magazines and getting your ideas from Pinterest or your wedding books you're looking at, and deciding what length of wire you want to have. So I'm cutting mine quite short, so I'm going to cut it about there. So that's probably 3 or 4 centimetres down. So I'm just going to cut it straight across. And you can see, I don't know if you can see in there, I've got my tube of green around the edge, and you can see the wires inside. So you don't want those wires catching on your skin or snagging on your delicate wedding clothes. So you need to tape over the end there. And I tend to start this doing upside down. I don't think you can see just a glint of the wires there. So attach the tape and go up and then over the top. So you end up with a slight bubble at the top of your buttonhole. Yes, Joan, yes, it's the way it sits on your chest, and also it's personal preference as well. And you can imagine if you're making loads of these, depends how many you're making, that, you know, just, I don't know, say you're doing a huge wedding, you've got 20 buttonholes to do. It just means that you've got, you know, 20 less sleeves to wire up. It's just my style, I've always done it like that. There's nothing to stop you going all the way around, but I just think it sits better. But a lot of this is your trial and error and your personal take on things. So yes, you just have to give it a go and see what you think. But you could add another leaf on the end there. And that all the way around. With or without. So yeah, this is all what the practice part is about, deciding what the overall look is going to be. So I would say that is the end of how to make a classic carnation buttonhole. Remembering to get your correct tape. So that could be the green that's plasticky, It could be the brown if you had a very natural look, or you can get this in green as well. And that's the crepe paper one that sort of has an ease to it rather than a stretch. And just not to be confused with pot tape, which is what you use in your flower arrangements. Right then, I shall sign off, and I will post some pictures so you can have a look at those later on. Nice to see you, Joan, and I'll catch up with you next week.